Production's keeping up, all right, but it isn't getting any better.
It won't either at the rate the men are going sick at the moment.
Of course it won't, and that's the point of this meeting. Oh, good, here comes Nurse. Now, I've asked you all here to tell you what the management have decided to do about the factory doctor. They have discussed your joint production recommendation very thoroughly and agreed to go ahead. We have a doctor starting on Monday. Good news for you, Nurse. He's had considerable experience as a works doctor, and his name is Alec Burns.
I know Dr. Burns.
Good. Have you got their sick report, Nurse?
Yes, here, Mr. Sudbury.
Oh, thank you. Now, this ties up with our overall absentee figures. Accidents are down, you'll be glad to hear, Rogers. And I wish I could say the same about dermatitis. Oh, I know that a certain amount of it is due to the work the men do. But how much of it isn't?
Well, no, Mr. Sudbury.
All right, we'll leave that to the doctor. And I'll be very interested to know what he can do about it.
The first hint of what was in store for me came when I was trying to find the turning to the factory. I stopped to ask the way, and it turned out that the man was going to the surgery himself. At first glance, he looked like a case of dermatitis. Fred Smart was his name. He'd been at the works for 3 years, and everything had been all right until they shifted him to the machine shop a few months ago. The trouble with his skin had seemed to date from this. He'd been off work for the past 10 weeks having treatment, but the thing wasn't getting any better, it was getting worse. I felt sorry for Fred. This kind of skin trouble is stubborn of curing and may indeed become chronic. For a thoroughly miserable and demoralizing complaint, dermatitis takes some beating. But the thing about the whole business which I found most disturbing was that there were a number of people in precisely the same boat. After surgery, I did a bit of investigation with Nurse. Yes, well, without exception, the skin cases are coming from certain departments in the factory. The machine shop, the plating shop, and the paint shop. Definitely something wrong here. First, I'll have a quick look round the factory. Mr. Sudbury was one of the old school of works managers. He was prepared to accept new ideas up to a point. But his main concern was with his production figures. I had to convince him what a problem dermatitis can be. I told him, look, it can be prevented if you will help. First, we'll have to make sure that we've cut down all the risks in the factory, and we'll need a great deal of help from the men. In the end, he became interested and agreed to come along to the surgery one morning and see for himself. Well, he came next day after morning dressings. I kept back a few cases for him to see. I showed him the arm of a lad who had just come in and told him how industrial dermatitis was caused through damage to the skin by irritating substances such as dusts, fumes, and liquids. This lad's skin was red and he complained of irritation. After this first stage, you get weeping and scaling. Dermatitis is not infectious. It is quite impossible to pass it on to anyone else, though it can become a breeding ground for germs. And unfortunately, it can break out on other parts of the body. I showed him a case of oil acne as well. Oil had blocked up the pores and produced blackheads and pimples. Mr. Sudbury was no fool. He believed the evidence of his own eyes, and he called up the safety engineer to ask him to come round immediately. He told Bill Rogers to go round the works with me and try to get rid of the risks or take preventive action. First, we went to the machine shop. Here, I found several lathes splashing the cutting fluids about rather badly. Bill suggested a shield to protect the operator's legs and thighs. He lost no time and had the lathes fitted with the temporary shields until the permanent ones were ready. Cutting down the flow of the liquid helps to reduce the throw-off. But still, some protection is needed for the hands. A barrier cream might be useful here. The men already knew that putting on the cream before work helps to bring off the dirt more easily when they are washing. Some of them asked me how it would protect their hands. Well, I said, it acts like an invisible glove and does in fact make some sort of barrier between your skin and the irritating substances you touch. But your hands must be clean before you put it on. There is a right cream for different jobs, and I'll see that you get it. In the paint shop, I found they were using a synthetic paint, which I knew might be a likely skin hazard unless it is handled with respect. One of the girls was wiping the surplus paint off with her finger onto her hand. Another was putting on a synthetic varnish with a piece of rag, which meant that her hand got smeared as well. A brush was the remedy here. I had a talk with these girls and told them they must keep their hands free from paint. I asked the foreman to keep an eye on them and to make sure they went on doing these jobs the safe way, even if it was a little slower. In one of the spraying booths, I watched a man with a paint gun. It was synthetic paint again, and he sprayed without bothering to put on his gloves. One of the most important jobs, this, to explain the risk and get the men to take action themselves. In the cremating shop, we had a different problem. Here, the operators wore gloves all right and some protective clothing. But the fumes rising up into their faces can cause a rash and sores inside the nose. This was another job for Bill. The installation of a cowl over the tank with exhaust ventilation to draw off the gases. He had something installed quickly and the fumes were kept under better control. In the plating shop, the splash danger was pretty bad. This was because the tanks were set too close together. I made sure that the men had enough protective clothing. More important still, I went over plans for the new shop with Bill. Here, the layout will cut down skin contact. He told me that the shop would be ready in a fortnight. Finally, my campaign included a talk to all the workers on the most important point of all, cleanliness. That started it. One man claimed that the water in his plant had been turned off for 6 weeks. Some shops had no towels and not enough soap. I got them their towels. The management arranged a regular supply of soap and saw to it that the water was turned on again. And on top of this, I organized weekly inspections. It wasn't long before the men were helping all along the line, and my dermatitis figures dropped down by about 50%.